Hello and welcome to a episode of the Euro blog for November 2022. Small disclaimer, this video may well contain triggers as we do talk about suicide, anxiety, depression, as well as things like substance abuse and a range of mental health difficulties that people face every day. So please, if you do go into this, do just be aware and make sure you look after yourself before and after, especially if that means talking to someone else and getting their support. Now, onto the vlog. Hello and welcome to the You All Right podcast, a chat about male mental health for Movember 2022. I am joined today by my dear friend James.
Hi.
And we're going to talk about sexuality and its impact on male health. So I'm going to start with the question, James, really. Do you believe that sexuality does have an impact on male health?
Yeah, short answer, yes. Longer answer is obviously pretty complicated. And there's so many aspects of it, that can of health that can be impacted by sexuality. But I think really for me, there's two main ones that really stand out, that are impacted by a person's sexual or gender identity. So being LGBTQ plus. I'm not sure if your followers know about LGBTQ plus, but just as a quick rundown for that, in case anybody's not in the know. So most of you might have heard of LGBT before, which stands for lesbian, gay, bisexual, and trans. But there's various versions of the acronym. The acronym itself, I think, is 20 plus letters long.
Oh, well, I've seen the full one. Yes, it is.
Yeah. And each one of the letters stands for a different gender or sexual identity within the community. LGBT plus or LGBTQ plus, LGBTQIA plus are the three most common ones now. And the Q generally can mean queer. I has got a couple of different ones. I'm not sure about which one it is currently. But essentially, the plus means and all of the other identities within the acronym. It's by no means a clean or easy way to do it, and there's other ways that are potentially better but are also problematic. So this is the current way of referring to the community at the moment, at least. But yeah, back to kind of health and the impacts that LGBTQ plus identities can have on health. I think the main and the biggest one for me is definitely mental health issues, which obviously goes hand in hand with Movember and what Movember's about. They're really big on the mental health side as well as others, but that's always one that stands out to me. And really, it's really complex. Some stats probably to ease us in. I generally have quite a methodical approach to things, so I think we start with some stats and I can give some of my experiences and my thoughts around it. So I think I want to get this out there first, that being LGBTQ plus doesn't mean you have mental health issues. It's not the reason for them in that sense, that they don't go hand in hand in that way. I think that's very important to call out there.
I think that's quite a good key point to start on. Yes, we're not insinuating or even suggesting that your sexuality means that you may have mental health issues.
Yeah, exactly. It's more that the identity and the things behind being LGBTQ plus means you're more likely to develop mental health issues because of various different kind of issues within that development and that identity. So yeah, I mean, some stats I've got on my screen. There have been a few studies, and if you just Google it, there's a lot of good pages that come up on the first few results, really. And Google is great for that sort of thing. But there's been a lot of studies, and they all kind of point towards that there is higher risks of suicidal behavior, self-harm, so things like depression, anxiety, for people that are LGBTQ compared to their non-LGBTQ plus peers. Some quite alarming stats. Gay and bisexual men specifically are 4 times more likely to commit or attempt suicide across their lifetime than the rest of the population. more generally, LGBT plus people are 1.5 times more likely to develop depression and anxiety. And 67% of trans people, I don't know when this was dated, but it says in the previous year, I think this was last year, so for 2020, were experienced depression, and 46% thought about ending their life. Another study, which was run by Stonewall, the UK's leading LGBTQ plus charity. You may have heard of them a lot in the media at the moment. There's a lot of arguments going on in the media about their effectiveness. I personally volunteered for Stonewall, and they really do care, and they do an amazing job. I'm a big advocate for Stonewall, despite what's being reported on them. A lot of it's not true. Sorry, sidebar there. But their study found that in the year that they did the study, half of LGBTQ plus people experienced depression, and 3 in 5 had anxiety, and 1 in 8 18 to 24-year-olds in the community attempted to end their life, with almost half of trans people thinking of taking their life. Now, though a lot of those figures aren't specific to men, they're more broad across the community, but we have to remember, and a lot of the conversations we have around men's mental health and men's health often doesn't call out specifics for trans men, which again have even more complex issues, particularly depending on what stage of surgery they've had, if they wanted to have any surgeries at all, any medication, such as T. Again, trans men don't have to have any of them to be a trans man, but a lot of them do. But a lot of them don't have all of the surgeries. So there's a lot of complexity there, which feeds in then to the mental health, aside from the normal health issues, feeds into the mental health issues as well. So it's a really, really complex area. And yeah, essentially LGBTQ plus identities affect mental health. Some of those reasons are things like trying to figure out your own identity, feeling like an outcast, going, I'm not normal, whatever normal is. You're different to the default of straight. That all messes with your head. And I was quite lucky. So it's I'll be bringing some of my own personal experiences here. I grew up in a very, very open, lovely household. There was no kind of homophobia or discrimination. It was just a very loving household. And even I struggled with my identity and coming to terms with that I was gay, and that's somebody who had support. You then look at guys, non-binary people, even women that grow up in households that their parents are extremely homophobic and not afraid to show it, and they've got to try and come to terms with that. So if you take me, who I have anxiety and I have had depression in the past, and I had support mechanisms, and I still, experience those issues. Take what I was experiencing and then put all of that pressure and all of that hatred on top of that. That it's no wonder that the stats are what they are. If anything, I'm surprised they're not worse stats, to be honest. So that's kind of a lot around mental health from a stats point of view. But yeah, my personal experience is very much, I knew from probably around year 6 at school that I was gay, but it took until year 13 to come out. And I came out to my best friend first because she was in a relationship with a woman. So it was like, okay, one of us sort of thing.
One of us. Part of the team.
Yeah. And then so he came out to everybody. But for me, just standing in front of a mirror and saying I'm gay was the hardest thing in the world. And I know that is where a lot of my mental health, there's family history as well as mental health issues, which plays a part, but that obviously can't have helped, with the LGBT side of things and coming to terms with myself. So yeah, it does have an impact, and I think I've said that a few times now. I think I'm repeating myself now, so
but I think it's key. But you said repeating yourself, but I think sometimes it's key that we do repeat that. I think it does go by the by, because it's a conversation that has to happen regularly and often. in an open enough mindset that actually it becomes part of normality. I mean, just to, when you were talking about the personal side there, just to bring in my own, I too, probably year 6, give or take, I knew that I was bi quite happily. And then I think I came out in year 9, faced very immense bullying for a small amount of time. And actually, it all went settled down because I was lucky enough that I didn't care at that point. So I was like, you guys can say whatever you want. I'm just going to be me. And then I hadn't experienced anything for years until like a few months ago, I got called a very derogatory name across a car park because I was listening to music, and it must have been the way I was dressed. Had on a purple shirt and some tight blue trousers because I've been out inside a suit. And I got heckled at by a guy driving past me. And that was like, bear in mind, I'm quite confident in myself. I've been around for many years now. I've been talking about this for years. And I felt taken back, and I felt angry, and my chest felt tight, and I didn't know where I felt really dazed because actually I'd gone from being this really confident person to a very anxious state in a matter of seconds, purely because my sexuality was called upon in such an attacking way. And I think that's going to lead me into what I next want to just present to you just a little bit, is the idea of rejection. Because, you did say, people, not everyone has supportive households. And just kind of like what your views are on how common rejection actually is.
Yeah, it's a difficult one. Just before we do go into that, you did unlock a memory there for me personally. Around the bullying side of things. So I wasn't bullied when I came out, because I came out, in year 13. At that point, in my school, it was a very small year group by the time we got to year 13. And at that point, we were months away from finishing and going to uni. But when I was in first school, primary school for everybody else that weren't in a 3-tier system like me.
Junior school, yes.
Yeah, primary school, junior school, whatever you call it in your area. But it was like probably from about year 2 or year 3, up until probably around year 8, I was bullied. Not because I was out as gay, but I was called gay. I was called, the F word. All of the kind of derogatory gay terms. I was bullied for being gay, even though I didn't know what gay was. I didn't know what it was at the time. So again, even the perception, like you said, of being queer, gay, bi, however you identify, but even the perception of that can cause bullying, and then bullying affects mental health. The me comes in terms of my identity, definitely had an impact on my mental health, and still does. Legacy does, but so does that bullying, and they kind of go hand in hand, and people don't realize that sometimes as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, sorry.
Got sidetracked there. No, I think it. But then I don't think it's key moments like that, moments where memories spark up. I'm a very big advocate of speaking about what happened in my life. I've had to ever since I was quite literally, my entire life history resulted. And I've always been very open about my story since that point. But I think it's key that we talk about the moments that come up that we forget, especially over the past 2 years. A lot of things have happened, and randomly they'll trigger like a memory for me, a memory that I completely forgot about. And I think it's key, just off sexuality for a moment, just in general, to speak about those memories when they appear, because normally when we box them and we get rid of them, actually they're just waiting to resurface again. But just to bring it back around to just the idea, rejection for sexuality, rejection for gender identity, rejection around that entire place is actually quite a common thing. By family, most keenly, by friends. I know a lot of people that have lost friends and actually been not disowned, probably the wrong word, but rejected by their family. And I'd just like to explore your thoughts on that.
Yeah, it's a difficult one, because me personally, I don't have tons of experience, actually, surprisingly, in that area. I've always been very, very lucky. I came out to my mom. She'd been to Birmingham Pride before me. She grew up going to Nightingales. She was very much a supportive person. And I knew I didn't need to worry. This is like 80s, 90s. Well, no,
good old 90s,
but like way back when. And there's some stories there. But yeah, so I knew that I was going to be accepted in my immediate family. I had less confidence with family further afield for me. I say further afield. I don't have that huge a family, but in terms of my grandparents, I wasn't sure, and I was very scared to tell them because I was very close to my grandparents on my mum's side. So I was very scared because I didn't want to lose that relationship. Ends up being chased around my car by my nan because I ran out of telling her. My mum told her, and she chased me because I was too scared to tell her, not because I was gay, because I was an idiot. So I was lucky there. But and then with my uncle, my mum just told him randomly, and I was like, oh, okay, sure, fine, and everything was fine. And that side of the family are always really supportive whenever I'm in a relationship with that, whoever my boyfriend at the time is. But to this day, I still don't know whether my grandparents and my aunts on my dad's side know how I identify. I've never hidden it from them because they live in Bromsgrove and I've lived in Redditch, Cheltenham, Stevenage, and now London. I don't really see them all that often, and they're in their kind of late 80s now, so they don't have social media, so they don't really see me on any of them. So to this day, I still don't know whether they know, and because of their age and generation, it's kind of like, would they accept me or not? And it's a very strange situation for me because it's like I obviously love them as family, but I'm not close to them. So it's a strange one, but generally. And I was never rejected by any friends from school. As I said, my best friend was already, in a same-sex relationship. Another one of our friends group was also gay, that I found out. So there was already 2 of us in the group of probably about 6. So we were probably like 50-50 split, including me. So it was kind of like, well, if you 3 don't accept us, then you can go and join another friends group, and there's still 3 of us. And then the other friends group I was in, who's one of them is now my current best friend, or one of my current best friends. He's also LGBTQ+. So it's like I just naturally surrounded myself with people that were in the community or supportive of the community. And surprisingly, I found out since that there's a significant amount of people in my year group that have come out since school. Like it's quite a lot of us. It's really strange. But I know people who have had slightly harder times now without outing anybody or calling attention to anybody specific. Obviously, it's their journey, so you have to be careful in this area about that. But two people that I know, the one, their parents didn't really accept it, and they still lived at home. They weren't outright rejected or kicked out, or only kind of for a day, and then they kind of like, okay, it was kind of they don't talk about it sort of thing. It's not discussed, and that's tough for them. They had a lot of other things going on as well. I'm not going to go into that, obviously, but I could see them struggling with that. They said everything was fine, but you could see that kind of, it wasn't outright rejection like you see on like Tumblr and Twitter and stuff, where a teen's been kicked out and they're trying to look for a place to live. They're having to crash at somebody's house on the sofa. That's not the only type of rejection you can experience. You can still be in that family home. You won't necessarily get kicked out, but there's still a sense of rejection because your parents just like don't acknowledge a big part of your identity. And I think that's the type of rejection people don't talk about or acknowledge, and that's probably just as detrimental to somebody's mental health, because although it's a different way of attacking their mental health, it's still just as impactful because it's far more sinister for me, because at least if you're outright rejected, it's outright rejection, right? And where everybody stands.
Where you are,
where it's that subtle bit of nobody talks about it and nobody acknowledges it. It's far more sinister for me. It's a lot scarier. Like another friend that I've got, he's never come out to certain people in his life because he doesn't know how they'll take it. He's pretty obviously out, like in the community. Like if you take one look, it's pretty obvious. Just the way he interacts with the world. But it's that case of like, don't ask, don't tell sort of thing.
Yeah.
And that's that's really impactful on mental health as well.
I'm just wondering, purely because we're running towards time, is there anything else on the subject that you would like to mention, talk about before I call this to a close?
Yeah, very quickly. I mentioned at the start that there was two main areas that kind of, for me, was called out when you say how does it impact men's health. One being mental health, which we've mostly talked about. I think the other one is sexual health. And a lot of people get very squeamish when people start talking about sexual health. But it's really important that we call it out. Men who have sex with other men are far more at risk of HIV. To this day, that's still true. And other STIs as well. There's just far more risk factors involved with men who have sex with men. Now, there's obviously things in place. You've got things like PrEP and condoms and other contraceptives and other things that can help you, look after your sexual health. Sexual health clinics as well are amazing. It's well worth getting regular checkups. There's things like HPV that a lot of men who have sex with men are now eligible for the HPV vaccine when they weren't eligible at school, because how it used to work was that they only protected girls against the 4 strains of HPV, because then the guys were naturally protected because of that immunity barrier there. And then realized men who have sex with men aren't getting that protection vector, so they've opened it up. So I would really, really encourage people to look into sexual health, even if you're straight. This can still affect you. But particularly LGBTQ plus identities definitely have higher risks in sexual activities. So Google is your best friend with this. I can really only speak for London now, but Dean Street, if you are near London, is an incredible resource for the community. They are pretty much LGBTQ plus specialists. Their biggest clientele is probably LGBTQ plus people, and PrEP and stuff like that. But and I know that in Worcestershire there's SH24. That's who I was with, or how I tested through. But yeah, Google your locals, and then you've got Hope Health in Gloucestershire.
West Midlands, why are you looking at umbrella clinics? Is what we have. Birmingham, right. Walsall, Wolverhampton, why are northern of that?
Yeah, but Google.
Well. Yeah.
Google will tell you. Just Google sexual health clinics near me, and you'll get a list. But it's well worth looking after your sexual health, because there's the risk factor. But if you look after your sexual health, then you're looking after your mental health as well, because having potential diagnoses can impact your mental health.
Yeah.
But it's also important to realize a lot of them are treatable. Like, just because you've got one, you shouldn't be ashamed of it. Now, in this modern day and age, there's no shame in catching an STI. It happens. It's part of an active sexual life. Don't be afraid of going and getting tested. Get tested, get treated, and you're sorted. Even HIV, undetectable means untransmissible. There are regimens of 3 pill or even 1 pill a day now that will keep your viral load undetectable, which means you will live a normal, healthy life, and you cannot pass the virus on to anybody else. There's so much stigma around sexual health, which links into mental health as well, all that stigma, but it's unfounded. Science has progressed so much. I recently watched It's a Sin. If you haven't watched it, watch it. It's all about the HIV and AIDS epidemic in the 80s, specifically on the LGBTQ plus community, and mainly gay guys as well, because that is where it hit the hardest in the 80s. It is really difficult to watch at times. It's heartbreaking. I cried so many times, but it's also incredibly well done. The characters are amazing. Russell T Davies is the writer, and I might be biased because of Doctor Who, but he did an amazing job. It is heartbreaking, but if you want to know more about HIV, at least in the early days, go watch that, and then go Google things about how it's changed nowadays. It's incredible. But yeah, that's my little bit on sexual health as well.
Just on the HPV vaccine, because I have it here. If you were born after the 1st of September 2006, you would have been offered it in school. Anything before that, you wouldn't have. Even if you're not aware of it, go and have a Google. Yeah. That's from a very quick Google.
Yeah, and for those that were born before 2006, was it?
Yeah.
If you are born before 2006, and there's a cutoff on the other end as well, but I can't remember what that one is. And you are a man who has sex with men, you should now be eligible for the HPV vaccines. It's a 3-dose course rather than 2 because of being over a certain age range or a certain age limit. But you're eligible for that for free through the NHS at local sexual health clinics. If you're a man who has sex with men and you haven't had the HPV vaccine, go do it. I got my first one in December when I got myself on PrEP to look after my own sexual health, which is to stop me from being able to catch HIV pre-exposure. I had my first HPV vaccine, no side effects. I barely even got a sore arm, which usually I get the most painful arm after a vaccine. So it's quick, easy, painless, and then 2 more doses and you're protected from the 4 main HPV strains. So go Google.
Just on top of that, yeah, up to 45 years of age. So anywhere within that bracket, go Google.
Yeah.
And even past that bracket, go Google.
Yeah.
Thank you, James. And thank you for joining me. Guys, this has been You Were Right, the podcast for November 2022. It's currently January 18th when we're doing this. So if some of the figures are out of shot or something we said is wrong, it has been a long year.
Yeah.
Thank
or
you.
It looks very dark and it's the summer when you're watching this.
Yes. But you can make a difference too. The Movember charity funds all sorts of things. If you can donate, please do. The link will be somewhere depending on where you're watching it, but please do, if you can, just spare a little bit of cash and we can really make a difference this year. Thank you, James. Thank you, everyone who's watching. I hope you have a very wonderful day, evening, morning, afternoon. Bye. Thank you for watching that You Were Right blog. It's been a phenomenal journey that we've been on to get this far, and we're hoping that it will long outlive the vlog series. But it's not over there. There is more to be done, and there is a donation link to the Movember charity inside the description. If you can donate, please do consider it, or even if you can just spread that link far and wide, get as many people to donate as possible, that's also fantastic. We are actively making a change, and you're part of that. So thank you. I'll see you tomorrow.